All right, I'll call meeting number 486, the Grand Falls-Windsor Town Council to order. The first order of business is the adoption of the minutes from meeting number 485. Any errors or omissions? Hearing none, I'll look for a mover. Deputy Mayor Brown, and a seconder, Councillor Feener. Any discussion on the minutes from meeting number 485? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Any business arising out of the minutes? Hearing none. We'll move into the disbursement report. Councillor Cody Davis.
Thank you, Mayor Manuel. I move the disbursement report for October 10th, 2017 in the amount of $1,177,617.49.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Cody Davis. Looking for a seconder. Deputy Mayor Brown, any discussion on the disbursement report? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Committee reports. We have several committees with multiple sets of minutes. So first we'll get into the Economic Development, Tourism, and Heritage minutes. Councillor Whiffen, if you would, there's two sets there, so whatever order you would like to start in.
On the first set of minutes, I had to recuse myself, so
Okay.
perhaps you can,
From the full set?
from the first issue.
Okay. So let me find my... Okay, right. Yes, so we will deal with that first then. So if you wanted to excuse us, was there someone else that said they're in conflict on that one as well? That's another issue.
No, just...
Okay, just Councillor Whiffen.
Yeah.
All right. So, Councillor Finn, would you mind reading those minutes into the record in the absence of Councillor Whiffen, please?
Sure. The Economic Development and Tourism Heritage Committee met at 4:30 p.m. October 30th. Present, Mayor Barry Manuel, Councillor Shawn Feener, Councillor Rod Bennett, Deputy Mayor Mike Brown, Councillor Amy Cody Davis, Councillor Darren Finn. Among the staff present, Jeff Saunders, Town Manager Clerk, Gary Hennessy, Economic Development Officer, Stan Singh, Business Development Officer. Taxi issue. The committee reviewed a request from Mr. O'Day, the owner of Bluebird Taxi, to transfer his taxi license to Mr. Pomeroy. The committee reviewed the current taxi regulations and recommended that the Bluebird taxi license be transferred to Mr. Pomeroy pending compliance of all regulations. The meeting adjourned at 5:10 p.m. Mr. Mayor, I move the recommendations and report of this committee.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Finn. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Bennett, any discussion on the minutes, or the minute, I should say, around that issue? Councillor Finn.
This particular issue did create some discussion in committee. And I have reflected on it a ton since our meeting. And I will be supporting it, which is contrary to my view in committee tonight. But I take there are some issues I have with the whole transaction, and I will later on in our meeting, either at this time, at your discretion, Mr. Mayor, or at the notice of motion section, I will have a motion to call for a review of those regulations, and I have some suggestions within my motion of how that regulation could be improved. Because effectively it's a taxi business that was not operating and therefore should have forfeited its license a long time before we got into this current transaction. So for the sake of tonight, in terms of this situation, I will be supporting it. But depending on how this debate goes and at your discretion, Mr. Mayor, my motion will be separate from this, but it can be dealt with later or following this.
Yeah, I would suggest if we could to hold your notice of motion until that part of the agenda, because Councillor Whiffen should rightfully be here as well when that takes place, I would suggest. I don't think you're talking about a motion that would change the taxi regulations as a whole. Not a specific issue as we're dealing with here in this minute, which Councillor Whiffen has excused himself from.
That's correct.
Okay, so is that okay? Any other discussion on that minute? Councillor Cody Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and I, like Darren, although he's going to support, I will not be supporting. I have some issue in this regulation in that I believe, although I respect that there is an interested party willing to take over this individual taxi license, I think that there should be an expression of interest gone out to the public so that others, if there is interest in a person or company starting another taxi business, that they should have the opportunity to put in a bid or a proposal to start a taxi business instead of just transferring this license to another individual.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Cody Davis. Deputy Mayor Brown.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I don't think the taxi business should be any different than any other business. The business across the street wants to sell his business. You get every opportunity to do it. Whatever government regulates that business, whether it be municipal, provincial, federal, whoever buys the business is charged with you have to follow the rules and regulations with respect to whatever type of business, fast food, medical, or whatever. So I don't think council should be in the business of deciding what people should do with their business. You know, if that's the case, and you own a taxi business in Grand Falls-Windsor, how do you retire? How do you sell your business and retire? You can't. Under what some of the examples we discussed in the committee last week. So, for my opinion, Mr. Mayor, I think we should stay out of what people can do with their taxi business. If the taxi business operating for the last 40 years wants to sell and retire, so who are we to say he can't? You know, it's our job to ensure that the rules and regulations of the person buying that business are followed. So that's my opinion on that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brown. Any other discussion on that minute? Hearing none, just a quick comment, I guess, from my perspective on this issue, and I look forward to Councillor Finn's motion because I do agree that there can be changes made to those regulations that would make some necessary improvements. In this particular situation, we ended up with two letters, one from the gentleman who owned the business, or owned the license rather, and one from the gentleman who wishes to take that license over. They had a mutual agreement. I believe it's an inter-family thing. There's some relation there. One wanted to transfer the license to the other, and they were asking for council's blessing. What guided me, I guess, and I will support this item, was the policy as it stands now. And the policy as it stands now says that council does have the right or the authority to give the blessing to this exact transaction. If people wanted to transfer a license from one to another, then council can do that. There's nothing in the policy that suggests that council should or may go out to public to put the taxi license up, and not to mention the fact that you got someone here in town who has shown the initiative to want to take this business over, and to me it would be somewhat unfair if we were to say we're going to go out to the public and then maybe his opportunity would be lost. But really, you know, the policy is clear and that council has the ability to be able to do this, and for that reason I will be supporting it. Now I guess the other note that should be made is that the owner of the license now has not relinquished the license, right? He has said that he wants to transfer it to a family member, so there's nothing saying that this same license owner would even want to give up the license if he wanted to go public, which would be a whole new situation. So anyway, that's where I stand on that, and I'll ask if anybody else has Any comment on that minute before we put it to a vote? Deputy Mayor Brown.
People who are watching at home and people here to know that Councillor Whiffen is in conflict of interest with respect to this issue because he works with a financial institution, and the same individual, I think, who was looking to purchase or had the business transferred to him is a client of Councillor Whiffen, so just that people know.
Okay, thanks for that. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll ask for a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. Did you get that? Just one, yep, Councillor Cody Davis. Okay, so if you could ask Councillor Whiffen to return, please. Councillor Whiffen, I'll ask you to read in the other set of minutes. You don't need to go through the business of everybody who was in attendance, because I believe Councillor Finn already went through that in the first set of minutes. So you can get right into the reading, please.
Okay, so for the remainder of the Economic Development, Tourism and Heritage meeting that commenced at 5:15 p.m. on Monday, October 30th, once I rejoined the meeting. The committee reviewed the current departmental objectives and made several suggestions. They will send final recommendations to the Economic Development Officer, and they will be discussed further at the next committee meeting in 3 weeks. The committee discussed how other communities deal with the issue of Airbnbs. The committee recommended that the engineering department draft amendments to the development regulations to include Airbnbs in the consultation with the Economic Development Officer. And under Main Street land opportunities, the mayor had requested that staff review our current information used to promote commercial areas in town, specifically the Main Street area. The Economic Development Officer presented an aerial of Main Street listing all of the commercial buildings and their owners. This aerial also included several acres of land adjacent to Main Street. The Economic Development Officer will fine-tune the information so that it is available for prospective businesses who might be interested in the Main Street area. And ChargePoint Commercial DC Fast. The mayor received information from a local resident on this new technology for charging vehicles. The Economic Development Officer will look into this process and report back to council. Council may consider a private-public partnership on this initiative should they decide to pursue it. Farmers Market Tent. The Economic Development Officer had discussions with the organizer of the Clarenville Farmers Market about their tent and its effectiveness. The Economic Development, Tourism and Heritage Committee discussed the concept of a more permanent structure. The Economic Development Officer will discuss the issue with the Farmers Market Group and report back to the committee. And under the Business Development Officer's report, the Seniors Trade Fair. The town of Grand Falls-Windsor implemented its 6th annual Seniors Trade Fair on Thursday, October 5th. The event attracted 600 visitors and there were 40 exhibitors. Under a professional development session, the Nova Central School District organized and hosted a professional development attended by 300 educators. The session was entitled Anxiety in School Children and Strategies to Help and was presented by Dr. Daniel Corney. The town of Grand Falls-Windsor sponsored the nutrition break and Deputy Mayor Brown brought greetings. The sponsorship of this event directly supports the town of Grand Falls-Windsor's focus on youth and mental health. And the Age-Friendly Committee. The town of Grand Falls-Windsor, through its Age-Friendly Committee, will engage in a needs assessment of an adult care center in Grand Falls-Windsor. And the meeting adjourned at 7:25 p.m. So I move the recommendations and report of this committee.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Whiffen. Seconder, Councillor Feener. Any discussion on the Economic Development, Tourism and Heritage minutes? Second set. Hearing none, I'll just add one comment there with regards to the Main Street discussion around business. I guess just where my thinking was on that, and it's great that we've got the aerial to look at, and I think there's a lot of work can be done in that area to identify properties that could potentially be used for business, or properties that need to be looked at maybe for other reasons. But there is a lot of land in and around Main Street, and we know that there's some, I guess, I don't want to say confusion, but lack of clarity in terms of what land is encumbered there, what could be used for business, where the lines are drawn. And what I was proposing, and what I'd still like to see us do, is to have a look at that from our perspective so that we could identify parcels of land, or maybe even a significant parcel of land that we could use to approach potential businesses for that area, to make it easier on a potential business. If we could say, here's 2 acres, 3 acres of land, locate it in a perfect area to do your business, and already have some of the challenges, I guess, explored in terms of what the problems may or may not be, to be able to pitch that area a little bit more aggressively to prospective businesses. Just a little more information on that note. Last chance, any discussion on the Economic Development, Tourism, and Heritage Minutes, number 2? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Parks, Recreation, and Special Events, we also have 2 sets of minutes. So, Councillor Bennett, if you would, please.
Minutes, Parks, Recreation, and Special Events Committee meeting, Monday, October 30th, 2017, at 7:30 p.m. In attendance, myself, Councillor Amy Cody-Davis, Deputy Mayor Mike Brown, Mayor Barry Manuel, Councillor Darren Finn, Councillor Mark Whiffen, Councillor Shawn Feener, Jeff Saunders, Town Manager Clerk, Keith Antle, Director of Parks and Recreation. Community Gardens update. The committee discussed the community gardens operation for 2017, which was a huge success, with all plots being sold and a great harvest by all. The group are looking for assistance with the expansion for 2018 season and answers to questions from the executive. The committee recommends the Director of Parks and Recreation contact their executive and ask them to put in a formal request to Council with all the details, questions, and concerns for the 2018 season. 2018 aims and objectives. The Director of Parks and Recreation presented the committee with the draft of the 2018 Parks and Recreation Department aims and objectives. The committee recommends all councillors review the present list and forward any further suggestions or additions to the Director of Parks and Recreation for the next committee meeting. Healthy eating policy. The Director of Parks and Recreation presented the committee with a proposed healthy eating policy for the town of Grand Falls-Windsor to help promote healthy eating choices for all town special events, activities, and programs. The committee recommends to forward the policy to the next Finance and Administration Committee meeting for final approval. User Group Code of Conduct Policy. The Director presented the committee with a revised User Group Code of Conduct Policy highlighting the changes from the initial proposed version. The committee recommends to forward the policy to the next Finance and Administration Committee meeting for a final approval. Miss Grand Falls-Windsor Pageant. The committee discussed correspondence from Coralie Mitchell for the town to partner with her pageant committee to host the Miss Grand Falls-Windsor pageant during the 2018 Winterlude Winter Carnival. The committee recommends the Director of Parks and Recreation contact Ms. Mitchell to get all the details of what commitment is required from the town and report back to the committee at the next Parks and Recreation Committee meeting. The meeting adjourned at 9:20 p.m. I move the recommendations and report of this committee.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Bennett. Looking for a seconder. Deputy Mayor Brown. Any discussion on the Parks, Recreation, and Special Events minutes? First set. Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Now, before you read the second set of minutes, Councillor Bennett, Councillor Cody Davis and I had a short conversation about the fact whether or not she's in conflict on the next one. Very, very debatable whether she is, but taking the safe side, she's going to excuse herself from this minute, and when she does, we'll deal with it.
Minutes, Parks, Recreation, and Special Events Committee meeting, Monday, October the 30th, 2017, at 9:20 p.m. In attendance, myself, Rod Bennett, Deputy Mayor Mike Brown, Mayor Barry Manuel, Councillor Darren Finn, Councillor Mark Whiffen, Councillor Shawn Feener, staff, Jeff Saunders, Town Manager Clerk, Keith Antle, Director of Parks and Recreation. Exploits Valley High cheerleading correspondence. The committee discussed a travel grant requested from the EVH cheerleading team to attend the World School Cheerleading Championships in Orlando, Florida from February 8th to the 12th, 2018. The committee recommends the director contact the principal of EVH to get details of travel to ensure they meet the grant regulations and report back to the committee at the next Parks and Recreation Committee meeting. The meeting adjourned 9:30 p.m. I move the recommendations and report of this committee.
Moved by Councillor Bennett. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Brown. Any discussion on that minute? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Would you mind, asking Councillor Cody Davis to rejoin us? And when you're ready, Councillor Cody Davis, we're going to move into the Finance and Administration minutes.
Thank you. The Finance and Administration Committee met on Monday, November 6th at 4:30 p.m. In attendance, myself as the chair, Councillor Darren Finn, Councillor Mark Whiffen, Mayor Barry Manuel, Councillor Shawn Feener, Councillor Rod Bennett, Deputy Mayor Mike Brown, staff Jeff Saunders, Town Manager Clerk, and Barry Griffin, Director of Finance. And just a note and a correction to the spelling of Rod's name there in those minutes. Labor report. The committee reviewed the labor costs as of week 43. Total labor was $2,902,305. This was $26,959, or negative 0.9 over budget. The committee recommends that staff continue to monitor labor costs. Cash collections. The committee reviewed the taxation receivable report as of October the 31st. The total taxes outstanding as of that date are $1,707,677, a decrease of $93,242, minus 5.18% from the previous year. The committee recommends that staff continue its collection efforts. Disbursement report. The committee reviewed the disbursement report in the amount of $1,177,617 and recommends this be presented at the next council meeting. Substance abuse and fitness for duty policy. The committee reviewed a policy for substance abuse and fitness for duty, and the committee recommends that the new policy be approved. Excite building phone and internet, Valley Radio. The committee reviewed a request to provide phone and internet service for the Valley Radio. The committee recommends that they be connected to the building internet service required for the building cooling and heating system. The committee also recommends that one phone line be provided. Chemical costs. The committee reviewed chemical costs and production volume for the third quarter. Total costs year-to-date are $161,590, a decrease of $17,713, 9.9% over the previous year. Budget available for the remainder of the year is $16,314. It was noted that the budget allocation for this year will require an increased allocation of $37,500. Honeywell. The committee reviewed a proposal from Honeywell, and the committee recommends that it be discussed at a future meeting. 2018 insurance. The committee reviewed a request from insurance providers to tender our 2018 insurance. The committee reviewed the procedures from the other towns. Starting in 2019, the committee recommends that we tender our insurance needs every 4 years. It was noted that our current insurance is in the 3rd year. Ski trail tender summary, supply of LED light fixtures. The committee reviewed the tender for the supply of lights for the ski trail. The committee recommends that this be awarded to McLaughlin Supplies Limited for the amount of $32,043.50 plus HST. It was noted that this will supply required lighting for the 1.5 and 2.5 kilometer trails. College of the North Atlantic. The committee reviewed a request for funding from the College of the North Atlantic Business Case competition, and the committee recommends $500 be approved. The meeting adjourned at 8 p.m., and I move the recommendations and the report of this committee.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Cody Davis, seconded by Councillor Finn. Any discussion on the finance and admin minutes?
Just one question, Mr. Mayor.
Deputy Mayor Brown.
Pardon me?
No, just acknowledging,
Sorry, I thought you said something else. The $153,000 we spent on road salt, or purchase for road salt, I would ask the Director of Engineering, is that the amount for the whole winter? Well, what we anticipate? So $153,000 worth of salt should do us a whole winter.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, depending on the winter. Okay, just curious, thank you.
thank you, Deputy Mayor Brown. Councillor Whiffen.
I think these are just minor errors in typing on the report, but in the labour report, if the labour was indicated at over budget, that should say not 0.9%, not negative 0.9%, because I believe that would mean it's under budget. And under disbursement report, the report that was presented was $1,177,617 and 49 cents, and the 49 cents was missing from the minutes. So just a few accuracy things there
I can make
for reading.
those changes, thank you. Any other discussion on the, well, we can certainly check the accuracy of it and make the adjustments if necessary.
It's an expense projection, so it's over budget and expense. So it
Right.
can be,
It can be
reported
minus.
accurate,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's not a revenue.
And how about we say we'll make the
Yeah.
changes
Yeah, well,
if
yeah.
necessary?
Okay. Yeah,
But I hear what you're saying, Councillor Finn.
yeah.
I'm with you on that.
If I could.
Yes, absolutely.
Just a couple of things. I noticed Councillor Bennett's name was incorrectly spelled in the attendance, and I'm sure it was in other minutes that way. But also I'd ask that the substance abuse and fitness for duty policy, in situations where the committee recommends it be approved, say the committee reviewed a policy for substance abuse and fitness for duty, and that's all it says. So that's what the public will read in minutes. So that policy should be attached to our minutes that gets put online. That's a simple case of something that should flow from the minutes as an attachment. I know we agreed to discuss that, but in cases where we refer to an attachment, we should attach it.
I agree.
Like, I think that's the simple stuff. And I think there's other things that we have to discuss further related to, like when letters get sent with personal circumstances and that kind of stuff. Those are the kinds of things we need to flesh out further.
Yeah.
So those are the only two things I wanted to point out.
Any other discussion on the finance and administration minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Before we move into the next committee, we do have a resolution to deal with. Councillor Cody Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution 2018-2019 Municipal Capital Works and Small Communities Fund. Whereas the town of Grand Falls-Windsor qualifies for funding under the Provincial Municipal Capital Works and Small Communities Fund, and whereas all projects and funding allocation under these agreements must be approved through the Department of Municipal Affairs and Environment, and whereas the town of Grand Falls-Windsor has recognized the projects listed below are high priority for the town and have need of additional funding for the Municipal Capital Works and Small Communities Fund to address this need. Therefore, be it resolved that the town of Grand Falls-Windsor apply for the appropriate funding for the projects listed below. Lincoln Road Phase 2, $1 million. Grenfell Heights Phase 2, $1.8 million. And Duggan Street Trunk Sewer, $2.5 million. And I move adoption of this resolution.
Okay, it's been proposed by Councillor Cody Davis. Looking for a seconder on that resolution. Councillor Finn, any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Carried. Okay, next up, Salmon Festival minutes. Councillor Feener.
Meeting started at 8 p.m. Monday, November 6th at 2017. Present, Chairman myself, members Mayor Barry Manuel, Deputy Mayor Mike Brown, Councillor Amy Cody Davis, Councillor Rod Bennett, Councillor Mark Whiffen, Councillor Darren Finn, staff Jeff Saunders, Town Manager Clerk, and Barry Griffin, Director of Finance. The committee reviewed the budget for last year's concert and discussed the options for this year's festival. The committee discussed a number of potential acts to be considered for this year's festival. The committee recommends that the Chair and Director of Finance meet to formulate recommendations for further meeting. Consultancy proposal. The Chair presented a proposal to assist in the management of the 2018 Salmon Festival. The committee recommends that this be discussed at a future meeting. The meeting adjourned at 9 p.m. I move the recommendation and report of this committee.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Feener. And looking for a seconder. Deputy Mayor Brown, any discussion on the Salmon Festival minutes?
Just to add to that, now Mayor Manuel, myself, and Barry Griffin, the Finance Department, did discuss, and we are in the process now of compiling a list of acts, I guess you would call it, and to spread it out over the four-day event. So we should have something for our next meeting to offer council for discussion.
Excellent, thank you. Any other discussion on Salmon Festival minutes? Just one note there, correction, I guess. Mr. Antle was in attendance at that meeting as well, not listed in the minutes. So we'll add him. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Committee of the Whole, we have two sets of minutes. Deputy Mayor Brown.
Okay, I understand, Mr. Mayor, you need to excuse yourself for one section of the minutes, so we'll do that now, maybe.
Well, we have two sets of minutes.
Right.
So you want to deal with those first, that's fine.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'll excuse myself and you can deal with that. Let me know when you're done.
Okay. I guess I can sit down or stand up. I'll ask Councillor Finn to read the second set of minutes from the Committee of the Whole with respect to the exploits blaze and probably.
Just 1 second, I queues up. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Committee of the Whole met at 9 p.m. Tuesday, November 7th. Present, Deputy Mayor Mike Brown, Councillor Rod Bennett, Councillor Mark Whiffen, Councillor Darren Finn, Councillor Amy Cody Davis, Councillor Shawn Feener. Among the staff present were Jeff Saunders, Town Manager, Keith Antle, Director of Parks and Recreation, Barry Griffin, Director of Finance. The issue was the Exploits Blades. The committee discussed a request from the Exploits Blades for funding for $2,400. The team name is being changed to Grand Falls-Windsor Blades. The committee recommends that funding be approved as a community organization grant. The meeting adjourned at 9:10. Mr. Mayor, or Mr. Deputy Mayor, I move the recommendations and report of this committee.
Thanks to Councillor Finn. Can I get a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Bennett, seconded by Councillor Bennett. Discussion on the motion?
I just want to make note that while I do support the the hockey team moving to Grand Falls-Windsor and changing their name to the Grand Falls-Windsor Blades and the expense that come along with that I wasn't in favor of providing financial support in the form of $2,400, but I was much more in favor of providing in-kind support as we do to the Grand Falls-Windsor Cataracts in the form of a sponsorship. So I wasn't in favor of the I'm not in favor of providing financial support to that, but I'd prefer an in-kind, so I'd just like to raise that
Thank
issue.
you, Councillor Whiffen, and certainly the committee. That along the lines that the hockey team is just really starting. They're into their second year, and they didn't have a set of sweaters. So council approved the finances to get them a set of sweaters. That's the second hockey team we got in Grand Falls-Windsor now to go with the Grand Falls-Windsor Cataracts. And I remember when the Cataracts were starting out, the council was very supportive of them and still are. So I don't think we went above and beyond. We just did what we thought was acceptable in this case. Any other further discussion on the motion?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Excuse me. I agree with Councillor Whiffen. I think this request is a little excessive. While I do support offering financial support to the various sporting groups, and we have been and we continue to, I just think this amount, and especially like you mentioned, that this was for a set of jerseys, I think that's excessive. And I hope that we don't see similar requests come in now from other teams as well for this amount now that the precedent has been set.
And like I said, the Exploits Blades are the second senior hockey team we got in town, so they are challenged with respect to fundraising as well. The Cataracts do have been there for a significant period of time and sort of got the fundraising, which with respect to senior hockey, sort of they got that market cornered. So this is a new team, and that's why the committee recommended that the $2,400 be approved for new jerseys. Councillor Feener.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll support the motion to approve the $2,400. My concern in committee discussions was related to formulating a precedent whereby we'd have to provide the same commitment to other teams that are in town. We have a town full of teams. So I have to find a distinction in my logic to support anything, because I want to treat everybody the same. So I felt these the Exploits Blades, which will now be renamed Grand Falls-Windsor Blades, are different in the form that they're a league that invites teams in on a visiting team basis. They'll home base here. They'll sell admission at the door. They'll function in much the same way as the Cataracts, albeit not at the senior level caliber. If I could say that would have been critical of
No, that's exactly what it is.
So for me, that was a distinction from a lot of the other minor hockey and other teams that we have going on in the town. Also, with respect to Councillor Whiffen's concern, because I had also explored that issue too in terms of $2,400, and when he refers to in-kind, like an ice credit or of something of that sort, and certainly something I would support, because a credit us giving credit in terms of in lieu of you paying an ice bill is cash as well, except for with an upstart team, a cash flow issue is a problem for them. So cash by credit, in-kind, either in-kind or cash, at the end of the day for council it means $2,400, whichever way you cut it. So I'm okay with it in this form, so I just wanted to speak to it.
Thank you, Councillor Finn. Councillor Bennett.
Deputy Mayor, the reason why I'm going to support this is exactly what Councillor Finn just said. We got an upstart team here that's going to draw some business to our community. They are going to represent Grand Falls-Windsor, not Exploits Blades. We're going to be the Grand Falls-Windsor Blades. And I feel that where they're just starting out, the $2,400 would have been nice if they were financially stable, in-kind donation. And maybe it would have been less than that. But I feel that the $2,400 for a set of jerseys will represent the town of Grand Falls-Windsor. I think it's quite worthy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Any other further discussion? And just to reiterate the teams from Lewisport, Twillingate, Springdale, Bayvert. We'll be traveling to Grand Falls-Windsor and staying here over the weekend and spending money in the town. So that was one of my, that was one of the finer points with respect to this issue. So I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? 2. So, motion carried. And I'll let the people at home know and the people here in attendance that the mayor's son is a member of the exploits, Grand Falls-Windsor Blades, sorry, and that's why he excused himself from this issue.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a second set of minutes to deal with in the committee of the whole, so Deputy Mayor Deputy Mayor Brown, if you would, please.
Okay. Committee of the Whole met at 4:30 Tuesday, November 7th, 2017. Those in attendance, myself as chair, members Mayor Barry Manuel, Councillor Rod Bennett, Councillor Mark Whiffen, Councillor Darren Finn, Councillor Amy Coney Davis, Councillor Shawn Feener, staff in attendance, Jeff Sanders, Town Manager Clerk, Keith Entel, Director of Parks and Recreation, and Barry Griffin, Director of Finance. We also had some visitors to our meeting. They were Andre Party, representing the Snow Angels, and Peter Robbins, Jill Kelly, and Fall-Windsor, representing Nalcor. First order of business, Mr. Mayor, was our social media policy. The committee reviewed guidelines, quick tips from the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner concerning use of social media by public bodies. Social media is a great tool to get information to the general public, but it is critical that it be managed and personal information be protected. The committee recommends that staff continue working on a social media policy that is all-encompassing for future discussion. Second order of business, Mr. Mayor, the Snow Angels and the visit by Andre Party. Mr. Party attended the meeting at 5:20 p.m. and updated the committee on his Snow Angels project. He is requesting support for his initiative from council, as well as permission to erect a sign at a location to be determined. The committee suggested to Mr. Party that if he is soliciting support from the business community, either financial or gifts for distribution as prizes, then Snow Angels need to be organized and a board be established or must partner with an existing group. This is necessary to ensure transparency and proper documenting for all donations and expenditures. The committee recommends that Mr. Party start the Snow Angels project and work towards becoming registered and have a board structure. When it is organized and operating, then council will provide support and will also assist with identifying a location to erect the Snow Angels sign. The Nalcor presentation. Peter Robbins, Jill Kelly, and Fall-Windsor attended the meeting at 6:15 p.m. Mr. Robbins gave an overview and update on public safety around dams. There are presently no established regulations, but the industry has developed the Canadian Dam Association guidelines. These have been accepted as best practice by most provinces. Mr. Robbins showed a YouTube video of an incident at a dam site which resulted in 4 deaths. It clearly showed the hazard and how activities near those facilities can become tragic very quickly. Mr. Robbins then gave a PowerPoint presentation on the Canadian Dam Association guidelines to show how they will impact the dams and use the Exploits River in our area. Capital Works is ongoing and will continue over the next couple of years. As part of this, work appropriate measures will be taken to ensure public safety when using the river in these areas. Measures will include public education, signage, fencing, and audible devices such as sirens. The committee thanked Nalcor staff for the information provided and appreciated the concerns expressed and the measures required to ensure public safety. It was requested that any fencing that is required on the north side of the facility, that's the town side, would be more decorative than chain link fencing. The committee recommends that staff continue dialogue with Nalcor as they work through this process, increase public access to the Exploits River via trails, etc., is the town's goal going forward, so we need to work with Nalcor to achieve this, but also ensure public safety. The town app. The committee discussed the use of the town app alerts function. It was agreed that the alerts push notification will be used mainly for notices such as road closures, water line breaks, change in garbage collection schedules, etc. It will also be used to promote the town's major events such as the Salmon Festival. Any notices to promote events should be forwarded to the town manager clerk for approval before posting. It was also noted that the format for notice alerts should be standardized under particular headings. The Abitibi lands. Council have had numerous discussions with government on the acquisition of Abitibi lands, as well as the training centre and the Grand Falls House property. The committee recommends that staff prepare a drawing showing all lands from Valley Road to the campground that we would want transferred to the town. All environmental liabilities associated with this land would remain with the provincial government. The area and request would also include the training centre and Grand Falls House. Environmental remediation and repairs are also conditions to be attached to the Grand Falls House transfer. Trans-Canada Highway median. The committee discussed concerns with the speed of vehicles through Falls-Windsor and the lack of RCMP resources in this area to police this stretch of highway. The committee recommends staff continue to lobby the appropriate government departments to have our municipal enforcement officers able to enforce the Highway Traffic Act and provide policing for this section of the Trans-Canada Highway. Botwood Port Authority. The committee recommends the town manager clerk represent council on the Botwood Port Authority Committee. The meeting adjourned at 9 p.m. I move the recommendations and report of this committee. Mr. Mayor.
Okay, it's been moved by Deputy Mayor Brown. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Whiffen. Any discussion on the committee of the whole minutes, section number 2? Councillor Feener.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on the highway median, Trans-Canada Highway. October 30th, Mr. Mayor, I took the privilege myself of going up on the overpass to observe the traffic that was heading west on the TCH. And in less than 10 minutes, I counted 40 vehicles. And out of those 40 vehicles, 30 of those 40 vehicles were in the left lane, which would be on any normal travel on the TCH would be the passing lane. And the 30 vehicles that were passing, I did not have no radar or nothing like that, but they were driving in excess of the appropriate speed. I spoke to the municipal police, and they explained to me that they don't have the jurisdiction to enforce the highway regulations. So in turn, we spoke to the municipal enforcement officers in Gander, who have the authority. So I know we've had discussion, and we are going to be taking it further and talking to the provincial government and seeing if we can get this issue addressed. And one of the things, like when the traveling public is going, when you're traveling on the Trans-Canada Highway, you're always looking for that passing lane. You're always looking to get ahead of the vehicle. And what we got going through our town right now, that's what we got. We got 2 lanes here heading east and 2 lanes heading west. And everybody, as soon as they get onto that second lane, they're pulling out left to pass the vehicle that was ahead of them. So I just want to make that issue, or just point across there that I think that we should, if in the short term, while we're waiting to get the whole issue addressed, we should definitely look at enforcement or trying to get some signage up there or something to try and let the public be ensured that we are looking at the speed that is actually traveling through our town right now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Feener. Any other discussion? Deputy Mayor Brown.
Just respect to the Snow Angels. Had a message from Andre Party this afternoon, actually, so he got his board of directors in place. He got a chair for every particular, whether it be finance, outdoor activities, signage, or whatever. So he just wanted me to let those people know, and certainly we wish Andre all the best of luck with the Snow Angels. It's a good cause. Basically, if there's a person or people in your neighborhood who might not be able to shovel snow throughout the winter, then You can go to the Snow Angels website, I guess, or contact Mr. Party, and he'll attempt to have someone shovel your driveway or path for you. So it is a really good project, and like I said, he's well underway, and we look forward to meeting with him again, I guess, or corresponding with him again to see where he might be able to put his sign at some point in time, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Brown. Any other discussion on the committee of the whole minutes? Hearing none. I got a couple of things there. May spark further comments, so we'll see. Just with regards to the median, I guess there's a lot of attention around the median story. I know Councillor Feener had brought up the discussion previous committee cycle, I believe, and there was some media attention, of course, to the story, and as usually the case, lots of social media attention. And the median, I guess, is one of those issues that, tends to get people engaged. And for a variety of reasons, Councillor Feener talked about the speeds going through town, the passing. What I will say from my personal perspective, again, is that the story here is that this council has decided that we want to get a highway strategy done. We want to have a consultant who would be hired to look at our highway as it exists now, what impact it has on the economy going through town, what impact it has on the economy within our town, what we are doing well or not so well in terms of signage and the access points, all in an effort to make the necessary improvements along our highway to benefit our community. And that, is a fairly broad scope, and the impact of the median itself would be looked at in the study. So I thought that too many people, I guess, were getting the impression that we are knocking on government's door right now to have this median torn down. That's not the case. Would it come to that in the future? Depends on what this study comes back with. The whole intention now is to do the investigative work necessary to gather the information, to get the suggestions, to see what we have and what needs to be done in a consultant's professional opinion to improve the situation to benefit our community. So one step at a time, I guess, but sometimes, things kind of take on a life of their own, and I think that was one, but it just shows the passion around that particular structure that runs through our town. I'll also comment on the Nalcor presentation, which basically, as outlined in the minutes, talks about the dam regulations that are going to be brought into effect, the industry standard, as they're calling it, across the country, everywhere except for Quebec. Imagine that. But everywhere else in the country would have these regulations in place. The signage that would be erected would be consistent so that if you're in Ontario somewhere and you're approaching a danger area, you would see the same sorts of signs as you would see in Grand Falls-Windsor or in other places in the province where Nalcor owns and operates the dams. The town's approach to Nalcor, and a number of times in the minutes it refers to continued communication and consultation. I think that's crucial in this, because our message to Nalcor is we are all for safety. We recognize that they have a job to do in order to ensure public safety, but we don't want this to go further than it needs to in terms of encumbrance on land around the riverfront. I would ask that Nalcor tread slowly and not be too quick to fence areas, even to put up signage, because with all due respect to the video and the statistics that were brought up in that presentation, I've lived here my whole life, and I don't know of very many fatalities on that river, and it's been heavily fished and recreated for decades, over a century really. I'm not saying don't exist, and I'm certainly not going to fight against something that's going to make things safer for the public, but a big part of our future, as I see it, and I believe that council feels the same way, is down around our riverfront and the beautiful river that we have. And a part of our future is being able to open up access to our river so that citizens and visitors can enjoy it, and people in our community can benefit from that through business opportunities, whether that be tours or zip lining or bungee jumping or accommodations or anything. With activity and with visitation comes opportunity, especially when it comes to business, and I'm sure we'll see more of that. So I'm glad to hear in the presentation that Nalcor are going to continue working with us, but I certainly think that we have to be very firm in our position of where we think lines should be drawn, if fencing is to go up, and maybe we could call on some local knowledge to help determine what the town's position would be in that regard, because we don't want areas fenced where there's no need for fencing. And I'm not a professional in that. All I can tell you is that it's important for us to utilize that land to the benefit of this community and the region in the future. So we want to keep after Nalcor, and as that evolves, and they admitted that it will evolve. Even when they put signage up, they will monitor the areas, and if they feel that extra measures are required, then they would act accordingly as time goes on. But again, we just have to make sure that this is not going to be we're going to do what we want here and we're going to fence where we want, and that when it could have a negative impact on some of our future plans. The third thing I'll mention is the Abitibi lands. There's reference of discussions with government over Abitibi lands. It's been a long time in the works and continues to be the government's responsibility and under the ownership of the government ever since expropriation back in 2009 after the mill closed. But as I mentioned in the Nalcor comments, I guess the whole future of development along that riverfront is something that's very important to this town, and I know everybody feels that same way. We want to make sure that government recognizes that we need that land, all of it, to be turned over to the town so that we can plan and do things along the riverfront that are going to benefit this community for the long term. So we will continue those discussions, but we need to take a closer look, I guess, again at the property so that we again can form our own position to say to government, here's how we see the transition taking place. Undoubtedly, there are concerns, some concerns around liabilities. There's some concerns about environmental contamination. There's some concerns about environmental remediation when it comes to the Grand Falls house and property. But ultimately, we need to be, as a community, I believe, in control of that land for future plans. And if government chooses or would rather we take some land and they would retain the rest, to me, and I'm sure to this council, that's not the situation we want, because the next thing you know, you have applications going in for Crown land in areas where we have tourism bustling and maybe something's going there that we don't want. Or we certainly don't want government coming back and saying, well, this is Crown land now, so we want you to pay fair market value for the Grand Falls house and property or the land down by the river, and that would certainly be a cause to sign a declaration of war here in this chamber if that were the case, because that land and the river has historically benefited this community and in a big way. And we grew from it, and we should be able to continue to benefit from it well into the future and for future generations. So we are anticipating continued progress and hope to have some more good news around that whole property sometime in the coming months. And that's all I had. I don't know if anybody wanted to speak to any of those or anything else. Deputy Mayor Brown.
Just to let the people know that the council is applying to the federal government for funding with respect to the study and the Trans-Canada Highway as it now sits. So we're hoping that won't come out of municipal tax dollars, but either out of federal funding or even provincial funding. Because as we all know, it was provincial dollars that built the median in the first place. And there was a time when Gander was going to have a median and Clarenville was going to have a median, but it sort of started here and ended here, but it was all provincial government money that got us to where we are today. So I don't think it should be any municipal government spending, or ourselves spending any money to try and correct or enhance the way the highway looks there now. I think it should come from provincial funding or federal funding. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brown. Any other comment? Councillor Bennett.
Mr. Mayor, talking about the median up on the highway, me as a retired firefighter, I mean, I'm all about safety. The whole point of putting that there in the first place was keep people from crossing the highway and having injuries and having deaths. I say right today that every teddy bear that's hung on a pole, when you enter Gander, every parent there, every family would love to have a meeting go through Gander. In saying that, I mean, I would be dead against this here right from the beginning, just for that reason. And Clarenville will be the same. You can go right towards St. John's, and every community along. It was one person lost a life because crossing the highway, and it's going to save. We'll never know how many lives we saved by putting it there. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Yeah, there's no doubt that safety, I would suggest, in my own opinion, improved on that highway because of the median. And as Deputy Mayor Brown had mentioned, the other communities, and you know, this was to be a provincial strategy first when it unfolded, whether a median were to go through or a bypass route were to be constructed, and Cornerbrook is the example. They had the bypass highway constructed. And I think, again, from my own personal perspective, to acknowledge that the median has improved safety and has likely saved lives, I would agree with that 100%. To say that the median has had a negative impact on our highway economy, it has. I mean, where are the businesses up there that exist? You know, they went, and it has had a negative impact on the businesses within the community. Again, that's why this study, once completed, I would hope the fact that the median has had a negative impact on our highway economy and our community's economy would be enough for the government to support the ideas that come from this study to make the improvements. So, you know, it's an interesting discussion, and I know, again, that it's something that people are very passionate about. I've spoke to some people around town about it. I can't say I followed all the social media comments on it because there were just too many. Hundreds between the advertisers' Facebook page and the town's Facebook and some other social media sites. There were hundreds and hundreds of comments, so it just goes to show how passionate that people are around that topic, and I'm sure we haven't heard the last of it yet. And I would suggest, Deputy Mayor Brown, even though I agree that federal or provincial funding should go into this study, if we are unable to access funding from those sources, I would still want this council to go it alone, because I think it's important to our future. And we just talked about the riverfront, or I did for a while, and we know if we can get the land where the mill used to stand, a part of the development would be connecting our roadways, Scott Avenue and Tulip Drive, to have that continuous arterial, which would mean a lot easier access down to our river, to the Salmonoid Interpretation Center, to the potential business opportunities that will exist down there, Sanger Park, Gorge Park, Grand Falls House and Property. So that would be part of the entire thinking, I would think, when it comes to that strategy and going forward. So it is an interesting topic for sure. Councillor Finn.
Just One quick remark, because I agree that the medium has given it years of safety and prevented, like Councillor Bennett said, you'll never know what the lives that have been saved when you compare to other communities. But then when you see that in comparison to the business development that goes on the highway in Whitburn and Goobies and in Bishop Falls and in Deer Lake, you got to say, hey, what the heck? That's what bugs people. But I think we have to turn our poor position into, we have to flip it over somehow and make it an opportunity for us. And I'm hopeful, not to put all of our hope into one study, but I'm hopeful that a study will lead us to find a way to drive traffic off the highway into a community that's right on the highway. Safe exits, in and off the highway, easy to get services. We just got to make it welcoming. And however we do that, I haven't got all the answers. I've got a ton of ideas and different things, but there are ways to make our town more welcoming, and that's what I want to explore. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Finn. Any other comment? Yeah, Councillor Feener.
Just 2 points on the issue of the median and the highway there. In talking to the RCMP, the highway traffic section has 3 enforcement officers on our highway in Central Newfoundland. To date, there's only 1 officer looking after the entire Central Newfoundland, and there is no options to even fill the other 2 positions. So we are severely understaffed when it comes to highway enforcement. And as for Councillor Bennett saying about crossing the road and stuff like that there, well, I mean, people are crossing that road all the time. The wall is just an obstacle. I see people throwing their bikes over the wall, so I mean, people are still crossing there. So the issue is that, they're going to be crossing. I'm right now, while everything plays out, I'm just trying to get the speed slowed down and get some awareness here that, it's eventually, something's going to happen. And, I don't want, heaven forbid anything to happen, but, we got to get the people slowed down. I mean, they're using our thoroughfare through our town here as a passing lane. And any councillor, anybody in the public can go up and watch for themselves. It is the left lane of the traffic, east and west, is strictly that the traveling public are using it for a passing lane. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Feener. And I should say, I didn't, because I agree with what you're saying, the speeds are too high, and I didn't mean through my remarks to kind of diminish what you were saying, because I do agree that speeds are too high, and we could certainly use more enforcement, and that topic has come up here multiple times in my time on council, and I'm sure before my time on council, and will continue to, unfortunately, not just the highway traffic, but resources in general when it comes to the RCMP, the fact that we need more resources, and that's just one example of it. And we will continue to fight for more resources. The other issue around the Highway Traffic Act enforcement is something, again, that we've been trying to push government to allow us to have. I'm not quite sure how a community like Gander had gotten that authority, whether it had something to do with the airport seems to ring a bell. I'm not entirely sure. But the fact is that they do have enforcement that they can do. There's certain things in our community that we're not able to do as a municipal enforcement organization that we should be able to do, quite frankly. And, I won't list any of them off now, but there are things that we need to be able to enforce. We have I believe, the competence to be able to do it, and certainly it would be a big help to the RCMP and to public safety in general if we were able to do it. So we'll continue to bang on those doors as well. Any other comments on the committee of the whole minutes number 2? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Public Works and Planning, Deputy Mayor Brown. Also 2 sets, I believe.
2 sets of minutes, Mr. Mayor. Not sure which one you'd like me to read first.
Well,
It's
let's
optional.
do the long ones first, and
long
everybody will
ones
stay, and then we'll do the minute where we need some to be excused.
Okie dokie. Public Works and Planning met 4:30, Thursday, November 9th, 2017. Those in attendance. Myself as chair, Councillor Darren Finn, Councillor Amy Cody Davis, Mayor Barry Manuel, Councillor Rod Bennett, Councillor Shawn Feener, Councillor Mark Whiffen. Staff in attendance, Jeff Sanders, our town manager clerk, and Nelson Chapman, our Director of Engineering and Works. 2018-19 Capital Works Funding Program. The committee discussed the application for the 2018-19 Municipal Capital Works and Small Community Funds. All previous applications to the Department of Municipal Affairs and Environment have been discontinued, and all projects not previously approved need to be reapplied for. The committee recommends staff complete an application to the Municipal Affairs and Environment for Lincoln Road Water and Sewer Phase 2, Grenfell Heights Water, and Storm Upgrade Phase 2, and Duggan Street Trunk Sewer. Tender ski trail, light pole, and installation. The committee reviewed the tender results for the public pole supply and installation for the ski trail. Curtis Power Works Incorporated was the only bidder at $129,250 plus HST. This bid is over budget. Newfoundland Power was contacted to compare the bid price to pricing they typically see in their projects, and they stated that unit prices are better than usual. The committee recommends this be awarded to Curtis Power Works Incorporated, but an application to COA be made for an amendment to the current funding arrangement to assist with the overrun. Tender for the ski trail, supply of electrical materials. The committee reviewed the tender results for the supply of electrical materials for the ski trail. There were 4 bids received, the lowest being Harrison Room with $19,592.50 plus HST, which is within budget. Installation of all electrical components will be completed by town staff. The committee recommends this tender be awarded to Harris and Room. RFP Main Street Development. The committee discussed the RFP for the Main Street development that expired on October 30th, 2017. There were no proposals submitted for this development. The committee recommends that the RFP be reissued in the spring of 2018 in an attempt to have a developer complete the subdivision. If at that time there are still no interested parties, the committee recommends a tender be prepared for Phase 1 of this development. The sale of the lots will cover all costs associated with construction. Kingsway Living Development Proposal, Personal Care Home. The committee discussed a proposal from Mr. Andrew Lane to develop a personal care home within the town. Mr. Lane is interested in purchasing the Maple School property for this development. The committee recommends staff contact Mr. Lane and request a formal proposal that meets the requirements of the RFP that was previously issued and bring back to the committee. Land new construction request 9 Mill Road. The committee reviewed a request from a potential buyer of 9 Mill Road to purchase additional land adjacent to this property along Scott Avenue. This land was requested to facilitate construction of a larger garage and possibly a granny flat if permitted. The committee recommends this request be denied because the plans for the riverfront development has not yet been completed. Accessory building oversized, 29 Ivanese Road. The committee discussed a request to construct an accessory building at 29 Ivanese Road that is over the 8% of the lot size, which exceeds 12,000 square feet. The development regulations permit this type of construction on a case-by-case basis, if approved by council. The committee recommends that this request be approved. Land request 50 McHugh Street. The committee reviewed a request to purchase additional land adjacent to 50 McHugh Street to construct a larger garage, 28 feet by 40 feet. This would make the new total frontage of 50 McHugh Street 135 feet. The committee recommends that this request for additional land and the larger accessory building be approved. Land requests, Grenfell Heights, Tuck's Be Better Farm. The committee discussed a request from Mr. Trevor Tuck to purchase additional land behind the Jehovah's Witnesses Church at 275 Grenfell Heights. He would like this land for a honeybee cranberry education processing facility. The committee recommends that staff schedule a meeting with Mr. Tuck to discuss total land requested and overall proposal for this land and bring back to the committee for discussion. Discretionary use, 181 Grenfell Heights. The committee discussed an application for a business, the Third Place Cafe at 181 Grenfell Heights. A notice was mailed to adjacent property owners and advertised in the local newspaper. There were concerns brought forward from 3 property owners. The main concern is the parking of the customers on Grenfell Heights. The committee recommends that this application be approved with the condition that there will be no parking along Grenfell Heights by the cafe's customers. Failure to comply with this condition will result in cancellation of the permit. Next order of business, Mr. Mayor, was discretionary use from 131 Harmsworth Drive. The committee reviewed a home-based business application for a photography studio, Studio 131 at 131 Harmsworth Drive. A notice was mailed to adjacent property owners and advertised in the local newspaper. There were no objections received. The committee recommends that this application be approved. Accessory building variance, 5 Knight Street. The committee discussed a request for a variance of 10% for the size of an accessory building at 5 Knight Street. A notice was mailed to the property owners within close proximity and no objections were received. The committee recommends this request be approved. Letter of concern, 463 Grenfell Heights. The committee discussed a letter of concern from residents on Grenfell Heights Extension. The residents are requesting a reduction in taxes because the town does not maintain the road and the road conditions are poor. This section of Grenfell Heights is the responsibility of the Department of Transportation and Works. Letters have been sent to the department requesting some maintenance be completed, but nothing has been done to date. The committee recommends that council meet with the Minister of Transportation and Works to discuss these concerns. Furthermore, council should take ownership of this section of road if the department upgrades the road to town standards. 101 Main Street concerns. The committee discussed a letter of concern from the property owners living at and near 101 Main Street. The residents are concerned about the safety, dust, noise, debris, and property damage caused by ATVs, snow clearing, and residents using the mailboxes. This area is adjacent to the trailway. The committee recommends that milled asphalt be placed along this section of the trailway in 2018 as part of the paving program. Also, jersey barriers could be installed to prevent access to the property from the trailway, and the Public Works Department will investigate options to keep snow from this side of the intersection. Kelly's Corner parking. The committee reviewed the concern about the parking adjacent to Kelly's Corner along Lincoln Road. Vehicles block the pathway for pedestrians at times. The committee recommends that the Public Works Department paint angled parking spaces along this side of the building in 2018 to help alleviate this concern. Furthermore, the town will look into other possible solutions. Snow clearing. Dan Brown. The committee reviewed another request from Dan Brown of 75 Circular Road that the snow clearing be extended in the back lane off Scott Avenue that runs behind his residence. The committee recommends that this request be approved. Garbage collection, Glen George. The committee reviewed a request by Mr. George of Premier Place that garbage collection be done at the curbside of the side street and not down at Main Street. Residents at this street and others like it cannot accommodate the town's garbage trucks to enter and exit safely. The committee recommends that the Public Works Department look into options to accommodate residents of these streets so they can place the garbage at the curbside of the side street rather than bring to the main thoroughfare of the area. The residents must be notified when the new collection method will be implemented. The meeting adjourned at 8 p.m. and I move the recommendations and report of this committee. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brown. It's been moved by Deputy Mayor Brown. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Feener. Any discussion on the Public Works minutes? Councillor Finn.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple of things I wanted to address. I wanted to speak to the recommendation there for 9 Mill Road, and I also wanted to speak to the clearing the back lane and from the request from 75 Circular Road. But the request for 75 Circular Road, I suggest be separated from the minutes so that it can be voted on separately.
Okay.
I think that would make sense in that particular case. But with respect to before I get down from my feet, the recommendation on 9 Mill Road, the recommendation reads, the committee recommends that this request be denied because the plan for riverfront development has not been completed. But I don't believe that was our recommendation. I thought our recommendation was that we would look for a way to accommodate up to 3 meters. But we would go back and have discussions, unless this was to reject that request and go back and have a discussion.
That's the way I remember it as well. Mr. Director?
I guess I remember wrong.
Differently.
Definitely.
Yeah. So it's,
Is that,
that's what I thought was the
Yeah.
result. Anybody differ from that opinion? Except for the director?
okay.
No,
Okay.
I can understand that, Mr. Could be-
Yeah, there was
several discussions.
There was,
Some
yeah.
going on at the same time. And
Yep.
so I can
Yeah.
understand how it could be confusing to the Director of Engineering. Sorry,
Councillor
Finn.
Finn?
Sure. Okay, well, that,
Yeah,
so that
okay.
will change, we'll have to change that in the voting of these minutes, obviously. And my other issue was to separate the Circular Road issue.
We could certainly ask for a motion to do that, but what I'd like to do first, before we do that, is there any other discussion on the minutes? Before we separate that issue and discuss that, I wonder if we could get any other discussion out of the way so that that would be the last thing to deal with. Councillor Whiffen. Then Councillor Cody Davis.
I guess for me, I don't know if it'd be worth removing, but on the land request at 15 McHugh Street, I did not support that request in the committee. So I don't know if that needs to be separated or if I can make my comments.
It can be separated. It's your choice, I guess, if you wanted to look for a motion to separate that. If you wish to vote against it in this chamber, it would either had to be separated and voted on separately, or you would be voting against the other things that I assume you probably agree with.
Okay, well, I recommend that we have that separated.
Okay? Yeah, we can deal with that, the separations at the end.
I guess just like the rest are just a few point of notes. On the Main Street development, I guess just for those unaware, the development you're talking about is on the Main Street West, because we had a lot of discussion on Main Street development and land available for business and all that. So just in case people aren't confused, it's the residential development on Main Street West that we're talking about there.
Correct.
On the south side of the road. I did, in the Kingsway Living Development proposal, I did raise concerns there. Largely, like I said, I'm not opposed to development on the land there, but I did raise concern on the potential size of what that development can be, and what brings with that. Does it fit the area? In terms, when you look around, it's all residential with the exception of schools. So would this fit the area here? And what the increase in traffic is going to be to that area. So in terms of, the visiting traffic, commercial traffic, employee traffic, those kinds of things. So those were concerns I had raised with that type of development, and certainly something that I hope would be considered in that proposal, as well the insufficient municipal infrastructure that's around the area. I live by there, and I know insufficient sidewalks, insufficient lighting, in terms of a lot of foot traffic for kids and adults walking to school, so there's some safety issue here as well, and the traffic load on the streets, and the one-way exit going down towards Woodland Primary. So there's a lot of things to be taken into consideration around that development that, I just want to bring that up here. Nothing major there. And my other issue would have been on the snow clearing at 75 Circular, which will also be removed.
Yeah. Well, I think it's safe to say that any proposed development would undergo the scrutiny of the different conditions in the area and infrastructure capacity and, traffic and all those things. So there will for sure be further discussion on that proposal, as we are still waiting, I think, to see it, and we would be discussing it further at a later committee meeting, for sure. Any other discussion on the Public Works and Planning minutes? Councillor Cody Davis, sorry, you already,
Yes, thank you.
acknowledged that.
I just wanted to touch on the minute there for Tuck's Be Better Farm and Trevor Tuck's request for additional land up on Grenfell Heights. I spoke to Mr. Tuck at the agriculture fair that was here a little while ago, and he was telling me what he hopes to be able to do if he can acquire that additional land. And for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of talking to Mr. Tuck about beekeeping and about his product and the importance of bees and things like that, he's been very active in the schools, at the agriculture fair. He's come in and he's talked to council. He's active in with the cranberry industry. And what he's trying to accomplish up there is to bring more awareness to the general public on the importance of bees and beekeeping. And the educational facility that he's proposing is kind of like has an adventure tourism aspect to it as well, where, he'll have gear available where you can, put the beekeeping gear on and go in and participate with him and, checking the hives and harvesting the honey. His plans also include a viewing area if you're, hesitant to be close to the bees, where you can be in a protected area and still be able to see what's going on there. At the M&L convention a couple of weeks ago in Corner Brook, there was a presentation there by the Newfoundland and Labrador Beekeepers Association, also promoting the awareness of having bees in your community and beekeepers in your community, and how just to bring awareness to the importance of bees, and not that they're harmful. Everybody thinks, not everybody obviously, but sometimes when you do hear about bee, people think if they're allergic to the bee stings, or they're going to make nests around your own area and your own home, cause trouble in your neighborhood, things like that. And that's not the case when they're harvested properly and cared for properly, like Mr. Tuck does in his area. And I'm sure if you spoke to members of residents and neighbors in the Grenfell Heights area, I'm sure they see a huge difference in their gardens and their flower beds and their fruit trees, and haven't had any issues with him having the amount of hives and that he does have up in that area, because they are properly maintained. So I would hope that, when we get the plans from Trevor, and that if everything is in order there, that we could certainly support this initiative for him. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cody Davis. Yeah, there's no doubt that Mr. Tuck has done a tremendous job in growing his bee operation, and he's one of the larger beekeepers in the province. So, this council, I know from previous discussions, supports his efforts, and it's just more about trying to define what land he is looking for, what is necessary, and how that could be established, because we know adventure tourism is all the buzz. But we do support that. No? It's getting too late? So, okay, my apologies. Any other discussion around the Public Works and Planning minutes? Hearing none. What we will do is, if I could, with the exception of those two, can I make the assumption that we're about to remove 2 minute items and we can vote on the rest of the minutes so that we can put those to rest? Yes. Well, the only problem with that is, whether or not they both want to vote against both issues, so we could deal with them separately, I guess. So we'll vote on the entire Public Works and Planning minutes with the exception of the 2 items, the 50 McHugh Street and 75 Circular Road, that will be removed shortly. Okay? So it was moved by Deputy Mayor Brown, and I know we had a seconder there somewhere, Councillor Feener. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Now, I will,
That's with a correction to Circular Road, or not Mill Road, I should say.
with the correction to Mill Road as well, yes. So now to formalize the separation, I'll ask for a motion to separate the minute that was requested by Councillor Finn, the snow clearing at 75 Circular Road. Can I get a motion to separate that item? It is moved by Councillor Finn, seconded by Councillor Whiffen. Any discussion on the motion to separate? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. I assume, Councillor Finn, you want to speak to that? We can deal with that now.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And then we'll do the other one after.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The minute that I wanted to separate from the rest of the minutes is this one with respect to snow clearing. The committee reviewed another request from Mr. Brown of 75 Circular Road that the snow clearing be extended in the back lane of Scott Avenue that runs behind his residence. The committee recommends that this request be approved. Mr. Mayor, I would like to argue against that motion. This particular request has come before council in my time at least 5 times. I honestly didn't take time to go back and through the minutes, but if I can't find it there 5 times, I'll find it 4 in the minutes. So it's been dealt with a number of times, all with the same conclusion, except for what I expect to be tonight, a different conclusion. In my opinion, Mr. Mayor, nothing has changed on this issue with respect to new information, anything that would change the logic of previous decisions. The issue at hand is snow plowing in back lanes. We don't have a lot of it, but we stopped doing it as a practice at council a number of years ago, before your first term on council. And one of the lanes that we stopped plowing on was Preston Place, which is when Tulip Drive got connected through, I should say. That used to be, the back lane used to be a road that went up to the cemetery that runs adjacent to Tulip Drive. So everybody on Preston Place had their sheds developed facing the cemetery because it was a fully accessible road. We stopped plowing as a council. Nobody in this room involved in that decision. I think maybe Councillor Davis. But anyway, not going to beat myself up on that detail. But anyway, we stopped plowing the back lane because it was no longer a requirement of council to provide services to the citizens. We plow main roads, and that became an accessory road that really only needed to be maintained by the cemetery committee if they wanted to. But other access was provided further up the road, so they abandoned the road. Council blocked it off. There was some complaint at the time that we should have maintained it because of the development that had gone on residents. Anyway, that's one place. There was some previous access up behind Brown Avenue when the water tank was on Brown Avenue but got moved to Andrews Crescent. A back lane there was maintained for a period. Another lane that we stopped plowing. 75 Circular Road, we obviously plow a section there now because of an agreement we have with a group of, I believe, 6 neighbors, where they had given up land on the front of their property so that the road could be developed with a sidewalk in lieu of, and in lieu of that, we paved a section behind their homes and agreed to maintain snow clearing for that road. Simple. Now, homes that are not at all a part of that agreement, one home is asking for the snow plowing to extend beyond the pavement down a gravel lane to plow behind his property on 75 Circular Road. There's no good reason to do it, not one. And I'll submit to you, Mr. Mayor, that it's the equivalent of, by plowing it, is the equivalent of giving a citizen double service. You're plowing the front of his house, and now you're going to plow the back of his house. It's totally wrong. It's the equivalent. It's the same as me asking for 2 garbage days. I want mine on Wednesday and Friday. Why not? I should be able to get 2 services if someone else can get it. So that's what this is equivalent to, and has been reviewed by a lot of people that have invested a lot of time around committee tables and council chambers with the decision not to plow it, except for what I think tonight will be. And there's no new information here. You yourself, in August of last year, were a part of a decision where we led up to writing Mr. Brown on this decision not to plow it. So a letter went out just in August of last year, where you supported it in the past, and nothing has changed. So I know we're going to vote on it, but I ask everyone to carefully consider what you're doing and not support that motion.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Councilor Finn. Old habits die hard. Any other discussion on that minute? Deputy Mayor Brown?
Thank you. Mayor Manuel, I'll be voting in favor of the snow clearing at 75 Circular Road. And there's a few reasons why. Councillor Finn says nothing has changed since we discussed the matter in August, the previous August, but I certainly disagree with Councillor Finn. A couple of things have changed. And they were discussed around the committee room what has changed. One is we've had next door to 75, which would be 73 Circular Road, we had new residents move into that house. There's an elderly lady there and her daughter's family have moved in to assist the mother with living there at all. She lives there on alone, so that's one reason I'll be voting for it. And the people moving into 73 is another family altogether. So we got 2 families now living at 73, whereas 2 weeks ago we had 1. The new family moving in has 3 vehicles. Everybody is quite aware that on Circular Road, especially on that odd number side, the driveways are short and narrow, and with no room whatsoever for extension, widening, etc., etc. They're stuck with a very narrow, short driveway, which you could only fit 1 vehicle in, let alone 4. So that's one thing that has changed, Mr. Mayor. The other thing that has changed is with respect to the residents of number 75 Circular Road, there is a health issue there now. And so he suggests that if the health issue and an ambulance needs to be called in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day, it's easier for the ambulance to access behind the property. I don't know who was down there to the side of the property. I know Councillor Finn was, because both Councillor Finn and I went down to visit Mr. Brown at 75 Circular at one time. So the front of the Circular Road, we're at number 75. Again, the steps are very narrow, and it would be a challenge to get a stretcher down and a stretcher back up in a reasonable period of time. I would suggest that on the other side of 75, it would happen a lot quicker. So for those 2 new reasons, I will be voting for that road to be cleared for 75 and 73. So something new there. And I would remind everybody that the plow turns in off of Scott Avenue and goes up to that back lane, it plows everything to the right as far as he could plow, to the right. To the left, rather, I'm sorry. To the left, and where Mr. Brown lives to the right, there's only a little bit plowed. And what would take, I'd say, 45 seconds to 1 minute for our employees to do the rest of it, I don't know what the big issue is. We're talking about 45 second or a minute work to do the rest of the lane instead of just doing half the lane. You know, what's good for the left should be good for the right. So for those reasons, Mr. Mayor, I'll be voting for the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Brown. Anybody else want to have a, Councillor Feener?
You'd like to speak on it? I fully agree with Deputy Mayor Brown on his remarks. A lot of it was what I was going to say. But I will add that during the investigation, I guess you want to call it, or the checking up on the area and stuff, the area that on the western side of the lane is, like I said, it not only is a plow, but it's paved right on up. And couple of those houses that have the privilege of having paved and snow clearing also have a driveway attached to Circular Road as well. So that was initially done way back when, long before previous councils ago. That was because of medical issues. And now we in turn now a couple, 100, 150 feet to the right on the lane now, there are medical issues, there are seniors in place, the same scenarios was up above. So these people don't have the privilege of having paved. All they're asking for is, like the Deputy Mayor Brown said, 40-second cut with a snowplow. That don't seem like much to ask for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Feener. Any other discussion? Councillor Whiffen, yep.
So without getting too much into it, I think I will not support this issue. And I think Councillor Finn laid out a good argument as to why. To me, I don't think it's warranted. I think it sets a precedent for other such requests throughout town. And I think the road he has at that property, there is road access in front of the house, and therefore I don't think it warrants a back lane being plowed. And if there is a back lane to be plowed, I think it should be at a personal expense, not a municipal expense. In terms of the other properties on the street getting access that they may or may not be entitled to, then maybe that's something that has to be reviewed in the future. But in terms of this specific request, I don't see that as a municipal responsibility or a municipal expense that we should incur.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Whiffen. Councillor Cody Davis?
Thank you. I too will be voting against this motion. Like Councillor Finn, this has been a topic of discussion every year for definitely 4 years, probably 5 or 6. And each year, the response to the homeowner has been that council does not feel that that service is necessary for that location. And my feelings have not changed. While I do understand that circumstances have changed in the neighborhood, supporting clearing that back lane because a homeowner has changed residences and now have a single driveway instead of a double driveway, to me, is not the responsibility of the town to fix that issue. That is a homeowner's responsibility. I have single driveway. I have 2 vehicles. If I'm parked in front and my husband is parked behind me, well, guess what? If I want to take the vehicle in front, we got to get out and move both vehicles. That's not a responsibility of the town to fix that issue for me. Also, the driveways at the rear property where we do plow, they have very steep stairways to access their home. They have been notified by Central Health that it would be near impossible to get a stretcher up and down those steps, and it was recommended that it would be much easier to access the back lanes, which is right on the back of their house. The driveway or the roadway is almost joined onto the properties, so the access there is much easier. Also, oil delivery. These homeowners have oil delivery. The oil delivery companies have trouble getting the hose down the steps to the oil tanks, which are located at the rear of those properties. So the oil delivery trucks do go to that back lane as well. We have had contact with residents in those homes about significant health issues. We even had one of the residences come in and meet with council, an older lady, she's probably in her late 80s at the time, and her sister were both living in that home and experiencing health issues, and had been receiving that service for many years. So it's just a continuation of that service, because we at the time had talked about discontinuing it to make sure that it was only that paved stretch because of the comments and contact from the resident at 75 Circular Road. He was adamant that if you're doing it for them, you should do it for me. And if we were going to continue, if we weren't going to do it for him, then we should stop doing it for them. Now that's not very neighborly. And now all of a sudden he finds himself in a similar situation and now wants that service. So he understands the importance of it now that he's in need of it, or thinks that this service is going to improve his quality of life, or in the case of a health situation or emergency. If you look, I mean, we've got the diagram of those two properties. There is no access to the house from the back lane. Plowing that additional roadway is not going to make it any easier for anybody to get access to 73 and 75. There is no access. It's a hill. Is grassed over. There's not even a walking path. So again, to me, this request has not changed in the last 6 years. I didn't support it the last 6 years, and I'm certainly not going to change my mind this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Cody Davis. Councillor Bennett, you want to crack at this too? You might as well.
Last.
Oh, no.
I will be supporting this.
Second last.
I will be supporting this motion. I have to agree with Deputy Mayor Brown. If we did this for residents in years past and paved that other section because people were ill, I really think that we should treat all citizens the same. And I don't think anybody should be treated different. I've campaigned down that area. I went house to house. I found it easier going down the steps, cutting across the gardens. You cannot go down over them stairs with a stretcher. I just don't see it. And when it comes to a pathway through his back garden, a snow blower can make it so much easier, make a path down there. It's 45 seconds to put a plow down. I mean, to make a couple citizens who are at health risk, it's going to make them much easier for the ambulance to get in there and see them. For that little bit of time, I think we owe it to the citizens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bennett. Well, I guess that leaves me.
Just a point of.
Yeah, Councillor Finn.
Point of order, in that, will I be given the opportunity to speak last, given that I introduced the motion?
You will certainly.
Thank you.
And another point of order, Mr. Mayor, would I be able to speak to this again, seeing as my name was mentioned in the debate or discussions?
Your name was mentioned.
Great.
Was it? I didn't
Yeah.
hear that.
Deputy Mayor Brown was mentioned on
I
a
tell you
few
what, I
occasions,
don't want
sir.
this to get carried away here tonight. Certainly, Councillor Finn will have the last word. I haven't had my say either. I will give you a very short time when I'm done there before Councillor Finn speaks, but that should clue up the debate on this topic, I would suggest. Well, all I would say, I guess, is that I will be supporting this this evening as I did at the committee level. And Councillor Finn is correct that the last time this came up, I did not support. New information has been brought forward, and there's no question about that, in the form of medical issues around a resident who lives at 75 Circular. And I would say, even though the 73 Circular, the parking net, I would agree with Councillor Cody Davis that that has no bearing on the municipality, and we should not be concerned at all with that. But I think precedent has been set in the fact that we, on a couple of occasions, have plowed the other end of this very same lane for medical reasons. And now we've got 75 Circular Road coming forward with medical reasons that were not a part of our discussion or debate previously. So I would suggest that precedent has already been set. And to couple that with the fact that we're in there plowing anyhow, We're doing the left side and a part of the right side. 45 seconds, I think someone mentioned, or a minute to do it. Really, I would suggest that the cost would be almost nil in addition to what we're doing already. And I would go on to say, I would be willing to consider similar requests if there are other lanes in town and there are medical reasons for doing it. Then I would be open to that as well, because we did it for medical reasons for the residents on the other end of that lane. Now we're doing it for medical reasons for a resident on the other end of that lane. And it's very little effort. And I would also say that there's times it was being done anyways. You know, I know sometimes we got different operators operating our snow plows. Sometimes that's being done, sometimes it's not. I'd say just go ahead and do it for the reasons I've outlined and others have as well. So I won't belabor that any further. Deputy Mayor Brown, I'll give you a very quick second.
Mr. Mayor, and I
then
will
we'll
be
go
very quick. Just
Councillor
to, it was discussed that there's lots of space in the front for driveways, to expand driveways and to increase your wideness and length of driveways. There's no space in front of Circular Road. And then in the Circular Road, if you went down and had a look, you'd know. Also, people have been accessing the rear of 73, 75, 71, 77, right down as far as Railway Road. Forever. People have been accessing the back of those properties forever, and are still doing it today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brown. And Councillor Finn, you'll wrap this up.
Just a few points I'd like to make, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor Whiffen and Councillor Corder Davis addressed some of the points, so I won't cover their points where they rebutted some other arguments. But let me speak a second to the issue of ambulance access. Because ambulance access in the area, which if I were facing the back lane to the left, was an issue that was written to us by the hospital itself. You know, they thought that was a better access. On the end we're talking 73 and 75, there's no way there's an ambulance going to the back lane. Now, Councillor Brown could say, you know, like there's enough room there, like people have traditionally used this land in the back, and they can't develop land in the front. I'm also a resident and very familiar with that area, and that's not the case. There is land in the front of those two parts. But when you get up further, Councillor Bennett's quite right, you can't do anything on the front. But those homeowners gave up land on the front of their property for that service on the back. Down where we're talking 73, 75, they gave up nothing. They never gave up anything. It's different, very different. There was an argument or an argument put forward about that we done extra paving to just provide services for ambulance. That's not true. There was paving done for a written agreement with 6 residents' homes. But the paving extended to the left further had nothing to do with providing the service to those homes. We had a catch basin there that we paved up to get so that we could channel water into. That was the only reason it was paved beyond. It was a decision by engineering, had nothing to do, even way before any of this became an issue. So to segue the argument from we paved it to provide a medical service so an ambulance could get down the road is not true. That's not true at all. It was paved up to a catch basin. That was it. So just to be clear on the facts. Yeah. And, you know, I realize it's only 45 seconds, and I probably shouldn't have put more than 5 seconds into it tonight for what it matters, like in the scheme of my life. But it matters in principle. You can't go giving people double services. That's it. So, Mr. Mayor, I've heard tonight how everybody's going to vote, but I urge you right now to change that when it comes to casting the vote. This is important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Finn. Well, that'll conclude the debate on that issue. So we do have a mover and a seconder, correct?
Correct.
And now I will ask for a vote, and I'll ask people to raise their hands if they would when they vote, just for clarity. So I will ask all those in favor, please raise your hands. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Okay, we have another issue that we are going to ask for a motion to separate the 50 McHugh Street, so I'll need a motion to separate that from the minutes. Councillor Whiffen, and the seconder, Deputy Mayor Brown. Any discussion on the motion to separate? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Councillor Whiffen.
Just on this land request on 50 McHugh Street, I did not support that for a number of reasons. It is an accessory building, and the accessory building size proportion to the home, in my opinion, was disproportionately large, and it would not fit the overall area. And prior to the discussion on 50 McHugh, we had a very similar argument on 29 Ivanese Road, where the resident requested a larger accessory building proportionate to the size of the house, to the size of the home, which was an issue raised by council why the shed was approved. So the proportionality of the accessory building to the home, I think, needs to be given consideration here, and consideration to the residents in the area. The fact that this request requires more land than the original plot size also tells me that the building is too big for the plot or for the land, and proportion to everything else. There is already a garage that exists on this property, so the square footage of accessory building to the residential property would not be far off. So that's another issue to look at. And I'd just like to consider what the other residents in the area who are building their homes and garages and developing their land, how that would affect them, and what it would be on the appearance and the aesthetics of the area and the subdivision. And if this is approved or it goes ahead, that I recommend that we give notice to the surrounding residents of the construction that will take place.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Whiffen. Any other discussion on that minute, 50 McHugh? Councillor Finn.
Yeah, just with respect to Councillor Whiffen's remarks, I supported this in committee and will continue to support it, but I do support his request tonight that the surrounding residents be written on the issue. And for all the arguments that he presented, it does make sense to me, because it is something different, but it's not unusual. Well, it's not, it is unusual. It's not uncommon, but it's different enough that the adjoining neighborhood should be notified. So if council was receptive to an amendment where they would be written, the neighborhood would be written, I would support it. If they weren't receptive, then I would vote against it with Councillor Whiffen.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Finn. Deputy Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll agree with Councillor Finn on this particular matter, and suggest we canvass the neighbourhood with respect to the new development number 50 McHugh Street, and support Councillor Whiffen's issue there as well. So I'll support that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brown. Any other? Yeah, Councillor Bennett.
Yeah, I will do that. I'll do the same. I mean, there are other homes in town that have large garages on their property. I'm sure this one here, it's going to be quite nice looking garage. I mean, it is in a new neighbourhood, but I do agree, Councillor Whiffen, that we should send a variance out and see what the rest of the community, the area of town looks like.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bennett. Yeah, Councillor Feener.
Yes, I agree also with Councillor Whiffen and Councillor Finn. Looking at the aerial footage of what we seen the other day there, it looked to me like the garage would be sticking out behind more, so if there's going to be any more development behind, like, it's not going to be lined up and stuff, so I agree with canvassing the area down there and get feedback from the public.
Okay. Councillor Cody Davis? Can I urge you? No? Yeah.
See if you wanted to.
No, you're the only one.
Why not? I appreciate Councillor Whiffen's comments on this, and absolutely, I would certainly support his request to canvass the area. I think it's important that we do that. So absolutely, I support.
Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, I'm not going to go against that course of action, and that would mean that our decision then, of course, to approve would be deferred until that takes place. So I'm also of the mind that we should canvass the neighborhood and get some feedback, and then we'll see where we are after that. Okay? So there will be no vote necessary unless we want to vote, I guess, to postpone. Well, we've already separated this minute that has not been dealt with, so we do need something that would be an action. So your support, you're suggesting we amend our action to canvass the neighborhood, and I would ask that you make a motion to do so, and we could go through that process of formalizing it. Just quickly, a motion to seek feedback from the neighborhood, you know.
Make a motion to defer this request until feedback is received from the neighborhood on the development on 50 McHugh Street.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Whiffen and seconded by Councillor Finn. Any discussion on the motion? No? All those in favor? Aye. Contrary-minded? Motion carried. Okay. Any other discussion on the Parks and, or, it's been a long night.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor,
Are
we
you-
still got one set of minutes, one item. That was on the,
Oh, and the
with respect to
original?
land request on 81 Main Street.
Right, so we do. Thanks for
And we
reminding
had
me
a
of
couple
that.
of councillors who were in a
So-
conflict, who found themselves in a conflict of interest, Mr. Mayor, so those two councillors might want to remove themselves from the chambers for this
Yep.
particular matter. Thank you, Councillor Whiffen and Councillor Finn have removed yourselves from the chambers.
Yeah.
Minutes, Public Works and Planning, 4:30 Thursday, November 9th, 2017. There was a land request with respect to 81 Main Street. The committee reviewed a request from Mr. Donny Verge to purchase additional land on the back of his property at 81 Main Street. Mr. Verge stated that this land was quoted to him 7 years ago for 60 cents a square foot, but he is requesting it be reduced to 10 cents a square foot because of development cost for this land. The committee recommends that this land be offered to Mr. Verge for 60 cents per square foot. The meeting adjourned at 4:45 p.m., and I move the recommendations and report of this committee.
Okay, it's been moved by Deputy Mayor Finn. Looking for a seconder on that minute. Councillor Cody Davis, any discussion on that minute? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary-minded? Motion carried. Okay, so that brings to a close the committee reports. The next order of business is to ask, are there any notices of motion? Councillor Finn.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I will use this part of our agenda tonight to introduce a notice of motion to address an issue. Just 1 second, I got to get it up. With respect to taxi regulations. Because I felt that, just as a quick preamble, I do have a motion to read, my notice of motion, but just as a quick preamble, is I felt that the transfer of a business, a taxi business, from one person to another did not get, was not handled correctly by the town, but not at a fault to the particular business owner. I feel it's at a fault to the regulations. I also feel that the transfer of a business, a taxi business, is different than any other business for the specific reason that the town regulates it highly and controls it and issues a limited number of permits. And when those permits are sometimes gone for years, the full extent of it. And no one here can start a taxi business, but I can start a corner store, I can start any other business, but I can't start a taxi business. So it's very different. And so what's important in a regulation is that this particular taxi business was not operating. And so while they renewed their permit, renewing a permit should not meet the criteria for operating a business just because you got a permit. So I think our regulations need to be tightened up for that reason. Now when I really reflected on it from our committee meeting to tonight, I felt that, you know what, the business owner went and got the permit, we issued the permit, fair ball. But technically, in my opinion, that license should have been forfeited and made available to the public. Now, why should it have been made available to the public? Because we regulate taxi regulations so that we provide public transportation to the public. And not provide public transportation sometimes, provide it all the time. It has to be reliable. So if you have a taxi permit and you're not acting on it, it should be revoked. You shouldn't get a chance to renew it. It has to come back. So that's the premise of my motion. Thank you. And so I'll read the motion that I've drafted, and it deals with addressing the taxi regulations. Whereas Town of Grand Falls, Windsor maintains taxi regulations that are intended to ensure safe and reliable public transportation service. Whereas the Town of Grand Falls, Windsor only has licenses for 5 taxi companies to operate, and Council is responsible to ensure a reliable service is always provided. Be it resolved that the taxi regulations be amended to regulate what happens to a taxi operator's license when they cease operations, and under what conditions may a taxi license be sold to another operator, albeit the transfer of a license must be approved by Council. Be it further resolved that the taxi regulations be amended to reflect that a taxi company who ceases operation for up to 30 days shall fully forfeit their license and shall not be permitted to renew their annual taxi license in any case. Taxi operators who pay any annual fees shall be refunded these fees that were paid while not in an active operation. Be it further resolved that when a taxi operator ceases operation for greater than 30 days and that their permit is fully forfeited, the determination of a taxi business, that determination that a taxi business is not operational shall be based on no metering, daily activity, and or response to calls for service when checked by the town's inspector. Taxi operators must provide verifiable records of daily metered activity. Otherwise, Council will assume there is no activity when addressing such circumstances. Be it further resolved that when taxi operators elect to sell a taxi business, this business must remain active and active operations during the entire sale process and beyond. Be it further resolved that when a taxi license becomes available because an operator that has ceased operation, because a taxi operator has ceased operation, then this license will be immediately made available to the public through a public expression of interest process that is finally approved by Council. Be it further resolved that the new amended taxi regulations will be reviewed through committee with a process for public input and finally presented to the public in a March 2018 public council meeting. Mr. Mayor, I also move that resolution.
Okay, notice of motion. Did you get all that, Mr. Town Clerk?
I'll
I'm sure
email
he'll
him.
provide a copy, I'm just joking. But that would be dealt with, as you alluded to in the last year comments there, in our committee process.
This resolution, Mr. Mayor, resolves a number of issues, but all of the content is open for discussion in committee. But the resolution binds you to discuss the issues that I've raised in the motion. That's all it binds you to, but everything must be discussed in committee. And then whatever the recommendations become, in terms of changing the regulations, they become as a majority of council.
Right. Okay.
Okay, I'll second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
I don't know if it's necessary to have a
Okay.
seconder in this notice. It's, yeah, we'll deal with it as part of the committee process, and
I would
everybody will
second it,
have,
but I certainly disagree with a lot that's said there, but I would second it to get the,
we'll have our
the meeting
opportunity to
going.
debate in committee
Look forward
for
to it.
certain.
cool.
Okay, so, Councillor Finn, you're okay with that? Okay, we'll move now into other business. What I would like to do this evening, in interest of time, is ask everybody to make their comments minimal. If it's not, let's not go on too long tonight. We're already 2 hours, 15 minutes in, I think, and some of us were hoping to get elsewhere. So, Councillor Bennett, you're up first tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of items I got to bring up tonight. As we all know, the Cataracts are on the ice the weekend with 2 games. I had an opportunity to drive back from St. John's on Sunday to drop in to Clarenville and watch a period of hockey, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And I also like to welcome back A.J. Whiffen.
Hear, hear.
A reminder, the Santa Claus Parade is on December the 2nd. I had to remind everybody of this because I get a daily message from Desmond Kenny reminding me the Santa Claus Parade's on December 2nd.
Desmond's not going to forget.
I'd like to thank the Men's Fellowship at the Windsor Pentecostal Church for inviting me to breakfast a little while ago. The music, food, and the wise words from Pastor King were wonderful. Thank you so much for the invite. And lastly, this is probably more meaningful to me than anybody else here because
Montreal Canadiens won a couple of games?
I can take a little excerpt from the advertiser, actually. On October 24th, 1972, the former town of the Windsor Fire Brigade recruited a young member who was just 17 years old at the time. Little did they know that this dedicated young man would stick around as a volunteer firefighter with the town of Grand Falls-Windsor for 45 years. Dave Byrne has celebrated his 45th anniversary with the Grand Falls-Windsor Fire Department and was recognized for his long-standing efforts during the 27th Annual Firefighters Ball on October 28th. It was a pleasure serving under Captain/Assistant Chief Byrne. I was for 10 years. I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to Dave Byrne for his 45 years of service. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Yeah, congratulations. 45 years of volunteer service.
Yes.
Great on Captain Byrne. Councillor Feener.
Yes, also on the Fireman's Ball on October 28th, I was also in attendance there, and I really want to acknowledge a civilian honorary fire department membership. The 2 recipients this year were Owen Young and Joe Zuri, and I want to offer my congratulations to the 2, and Owen has since passed, but his family was there to acknowledge it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Feener. Councillor Whiffen.
Yeah, on our last meeting, I'd mentioned a number of local cadets that were going to St. John's to compete in provincial orienteering competition. And I'm glad to report that upon returning, we had a number of medalists in that competition. So I'd like to congratulate Brock Tulk of 67 RCSCC Windsor, who got a gold medal in the junior male category. And actually, this is the first time a Sea Cadet ever received a medal at this provincial competition. And from the 1916 Beaumont Hamel Army Cadets, Penny Dove received gold in the junior female category. Toby Cutting received the silver medal in the junior male category, and Mitchell Edmonds received a gold medal in the youth male category. So Grand Falls-Windsor was represented very well, and we run this competition in conjunction with the civilian organization, the Orienteering Newfoundland and Labrador, and following that competition we actually had someone from the organization approach us wondering what we were doing out here with our competitors, because we had such a great presence at that competition. So congratulations to the cadets on the efforts they put into that and representing our community well. And also coming up this Saturday at Centennial Field is the zone biathlon competition for Central Newfoundland. So I certainly recommend or welcome everybody to come out and watch that competition at Centennial Field. It'll start around 10:30 Saturday morning. And as a member of Biathlon Newfoundland and Labrador, we're trying to grow the sport in the province, so I'd certainly welcome everybody to come out and watch what it's all about. Because of lack of snow, it's going to be a run and shoot type of competition, but in the case anybody would advance, it would be a ski and shoot competition in Corner Brook. So I'd certainly welcome everybody to come out and watch that competition on Saturday.
Thank you, Councillor Whiffen. Councillor Finn.
Just two quick things, Mr. Mayor. One is I'd like to, if I may, on behalf of council, extend a happy birthday to Geraldine Power, who turned 101 on October 30th.
Wow.
Her and her husband raised their family in Grand Falls-Windsor on Beaumont Avenue. They had 5 children, and Geraldine now lives with her daughter, Bonnie, in Ontario. And Geraldine is 101, but she is an active 101 years old. And I'm pretty sure most of you know her anyway. But I certainly wish her a happy birthday, and I think we should, as a council, do what we do for our centenarians, to send a certificate of recognition to recognize that milestone in her life. And I have the address that we could send it to her in Ontario, but she was living here up until recent years, and you know her very well as well. Certainly a big happy birthday from the council and the residents of Grand Falls-Windsor. The other thing, Mr. Mayor, I want to talk about, and I haven't had a chance to go back to committee on it yet, is Central Newfoundland Waste Management. And council has asked me to serve on the board of Central Waste Management, and I've done it because I've developed an interest in it. I certainly never sat out on council to want to be so deeply involved in garbage and waste management. But anyway, yet circumstances have driven me. And so anyway, I gladly accepted it. But you know what I plan to do, Mr. Mayor, is, as I do with all issues, I plan to be very public about everything I do with it. As much as I can put out to the public, I will. And so I attended a meeting, and I haven't had a council meeting yet, so I haven't had a chance to fully brief council through the committee process. And I would certainly do that through committee of the whole or public works, because it's certainly connected to public works. But we had our first meeting on last Wednesday. Someone remind me. Thursday? Thursday, thank you. And it started at 1, we were done at 4:30. And in that meeting, brand new introductions, 4 from the previous board, 8 new members, 12 in total. And there's something happened that concerned me. Really concerned me. We were given a presentation on a budget of 6.2 million, I believe. And I don't know the exact number. I don't. And it was a presentation. We were given information on all the different accounts, and it was a PowerPoint presentation. And the staff, to their credit, said, this is our budget. It was reviewed by the previous board, but they elected not to adopt it and deferred it to our council. Like, our council will now go through a budget process, and we'll review every account, and for new councillors, you'll get to see that process. So we had an initial introduction to it, and and we were informed by staff we have 90 days to adopt a balanced budget as per the legislation. And one of the board members put a motion to adopt the budget. And it was seconded. And it was approved. Honest to God. Voted and approved. Now, 4 people, in the debate on the motion, I said, I am not voting for a budget that I have not seen. I don't even have a paper copy yet. And so, like, I'm just being open and public about this, and I will be on every issue. And I just, my concern was, you know what? That budget is probably bang on. But I don't know, because I never looked at it. And so I'm not voting for anything I don't know about. And the town of Gander voted in line with me, and so did town of North Arm, and so did Fogo Island. But 8 new people in that room, never seen that before. I don't know how that budget got approved. That's impossible in my knowing of following some procedure. It may be the exact same outcome, but it's just not right that that happened. And I expressed it in the room, the vote went ahead, and like, holy crap, is that what I'm in for? I don't know how to say it any plainer, but that's all I want to share with you tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Finn. Obviously, we look forward to your continued involvement in that. There's been lots of discussion around this chamber and our committee tables when it comes to central waste, and we've raised many concerns over the last number of years, and we're glad that you're there, and I'm sure it's not the last we've heard from you or the Waste Management Authority. Deputy Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick items. Got to attend the Youth Mental Health Conference a couple of Fridays ago here in Grand Falls-Windsor. Just want to congratulate Dr. Lynette Powell and Dr. Chris Luscombe. This is the 5th Youth Mental Health Conference here in Grand Falls-Windsor that Council has supported and actually helped fund in some one way or another. So I think people of Grand Falls-Windsor should know that. We understand youth mental health is a significant issue in our town, and we're doing everything we can to address it. And that particular day, I think there was over 250 educators and almost 20 physicians, so a big conference. And hopefully we'll get some more. And there's nobody more on the front lines of youth mental health than physicians and educators here in Grand Falls-Windsor. And just to follow up to that, Dr. Powell I think she initiated this whole program with youth mental health and having conferences in Grand Falls-Windsor. So I'd like to acknowledge her in particular and congratulate her. She was one of 10 physicians across the country who won the Reg L. Perkin Award as one of 10 family physicians of the year across the country. So significant award, and it certainly acknowledges her passion and commitment to family practice medicine. And just finally, Mr. Mayor, just this past Saturday was Remembrance Day. So it was great to see a big turnout from the people of Grand Falls-Windsor up at the Memorial Grounds. I know Councillor Whiffen was on parade there. Good to see you there, buddy. And I also like to acknowledge our Legion for the hard work they put into putting off this day. And I think we got one of the best Legions here in Grand Falls-Windsor than anybody across this island, maybe across the country. People actually stop in Grand Falls-Windsor to see the archives and the historical data that's in our Legion here in Grand Falls-Windsor up on Queen Street. And it was nice to see a parade through town again. It's been a long while since we saw a parade through the town. I think the Legion and the cadets marched from Memorial Grounds back to the Legion. So, in fact, I'd like to see more of that. So, Councillor Whiffen, you should be able to do something with that in your position with the cadets there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brown. Councillor Cody Davis.
Thank you. I just had a couple of things, and I also wanted to congratulate Dr. Lynette Powell on her award. And not just, I know the award was dedicated to family doctors who demonstrate exceptional care to their patients in family medicine, but Lynette also has a very strong focus in youth mental health, like Deputy Mayor Brown mentioned, as well as women's health. Just an outstanding physician and certainly a great role model and a fantastic asset to Grand Falls-Windsor. We're certainly proud to have her and look forward to working with her on many wonderful and meaningful initiatives in the future. I also wanted to just mention the Firefighters Ball, and congratulations to Deputy Chief, Assistant Chief Dave Byrne on his 45 years. But I also want to recognize the amount of training hours that the volunteer, and I have to stress volunteer, firefighters of the Grand Falls-Windsor Fire Department put in each and every year. And it just amazes me that this year they put in 3,291 person hours of training, which amounted to, or was done in 116 training sessions in 1 year. Not to mention all their involvement in the community, visiting the schools, just being present out in the public, parades, everything else that they're involved in, their open house, as well as, and it's not a huge department either. I mean, we operate on a very lean volunteer basis with the amount of people who travel for work in and out. Sometimes we have less members available. Other times, we have quite a few members available. But to be able to show that level of commitment, to attend that many hours of training, and be as visible in the public, and be present and accountable at all fire, not just fire emergencies, but all emergency calls, highway traffic accidents within town, just to be a safety officer on site in a lot of occasions. So I want to recognize them for that and say thank you very much again to the Grand Falls-Windsor Fire Department. Your dedication to your community and your service is appreciated more than I think they realize. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cody Davis. Just a couple of quick things for me to clue up. Agree with the Deputy Mayor and his comments around Remembrance Day. So great to see such a big crowd out, Everybody knows it was a cold, windy day, bitter cold, I would suggest, based on what we've been used to lately. But it never ceases to amaze me, the turnout that we get here in Grand Falls-Windsor, and I'm willing to bet that per capita, proportionate to population around the province, the Grand Falls-Windsor likely gets the highest turnout of people who come out. And when you see the trouble they were having with the wreaths and organizing people in the lineup because there was too many people around, and it's a good problem to have. Obviously we could all go on about the importance of that day, but to see our citizens come out every year in such great numbers, despite the inclement weather again this year, is definitely great to see, and I would encourage everyone to continue that tradition. And the armories before the parade were just packed, there's so many people, and to hear the band, the regiment band as well, playing was a nice touch, and they played at the dinner that evening as well. The art procurement for the town is coming up on November the 25th. If anybody has artwork that they'd like to submit, you have up until the day before, the 24th, to get that submission in. And the other thing I wanted to mention was the Wishmaker Walk, which is for the Children's Wish Foundation, which is going on this Sunday, November 19th at 2 p.m., and I believe it starts at Forest Park or Sprucewood, one of those two schools, wherever the crowd is, on Sunday at 2. Forest Park? Okay, so, encourage everybody to get out and support that as well. And that's it for me. It's been a long meeting for everybody. I know probably my longest in my 4 years and a bit. So look forward to more. That's what it's all about, and that's what we're here for, is to discuss these issues. So enjoyed it very much this evening, and with that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn. No one wants to? All right. Councillor Finn, and a seconder?
I don't know if you caught it, but Samantha raised her hand.
I don't blame her. And Councillor Cody Davis is second, I assume? Yeah. All those in favor? Aye. Contraband it. See you next time.